Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show.
The Mandalorian is the show on Disney Plus that's all about Star Wars and a Mandalorian, funnily enough. Chapter 12, The Siege, sees Mandy's crappy ship being able to fly again, but still in terrible shape. So he decides instead of trying to go over somewhere more difficult, why not just check in with his old pals Kara and Greef? So he lands on that planet and finds out that Kara's now the marshal of the settlement, and Greef's kinda like the mayor, and as a favour for fixing up his old spaceship, they stick Bubba Yods in daycare, and the three of them decide to team up with a blue guy from the very first episode, remember him? And take out an old Imperial base that's hidden on the planet. So they scoot off down to the lava plains, and Mandy flies up and opens the doors, and the rest of them head inside, and turns out that he's been a wee bit busy with some stormtroopers. So they still manage to sneak in, and the whiny blue guy manages to hack the coolant system, making the whole base ready to overload and explode out of lava. Now of course that means it's runaway time, so they try and scoot away, but only they end up finding a message sent from an Imperial scientist talking about needing Bubba Yodd's blood for experiments and talking to Gus Fring. And they find a whole load of weird experimental creature tanks, but they don't have time to hang around because they've got to get gone, so Mandy takes a shortcut and flies out of Dodge back to the settlement, and the other three make it up to the platform. But it's a wee bit shooty up there, so they try and hijack or armoured transport and blast their way out. Only they end up getting chased by speeder bikes, and they fight them off, and then TIE fighters, and it looks like that's going to ruin the day when, boom, Mandy flies in with his completely new, completely fixed up, tarted up ship, and then he dogfights off the remaining TIE fighters till they're all the way home free. And after that, Mandy's off on his quest again in his shiny new motor, and Kara and Greef spin out a whole story to the Republic cops, and they're like, fair enough, but we know something's going down here, but keep an eye out and keep up the good work. And they're right, because on board the baddie ship, one of Greef's mechanics radios in to say yeah, he put a tracker on Mandy's ship like he was ordered, and the Imperial officer tells Gus, and he's pretty happy as he looks at his funky new robot troops. So what did I think? Well, at first I thought this was another standalone filler episode, and in some ways it kind of is, but I also used it to piggyback an awful lot of stuff that's feeding into the overall story arc and the overarching narrative of the series. I mean, yeah, we've got callbacks to Moff Gideon and the science dude from season 1, and then wanting Bubba Yods for experiments, but now we're actually getting to understand what those experiments are about, and that they're kind of nasty. I mean, the fact that we saw like shots of what looked like, alien resurrection levels of genetic manipulation and growing stuff in tanks, and that made me wonder if that ties into like the secret force using stormtrooper things or something, or if this is part of the setup for the clone Sith stuff that they mentioned in Rise of Skywalker with them bringing back Palpatine, and although frankly, to be honest, I'd rather forget all of that nonsense because that was a terrible film. But I saw that in this episode was also directed by Carl Weathers. Now that Carl Weathers who plays Greef, the guy who played Apollo Creed back in the Rocky movies. And I thought he did a really good job here. I mean, he gets some decent action in, he gets some half-decent comedy, although some of it was a little bit on the nose and over the top. But yeah, I liked it. And he also managed to get a crew member in the back of shot here, but there you go. Everyone seems to be at that since it happened on Game of Thrones with that Starbucks cup. But I also like the whole thing about Kara being set up as this kind of lone wolf, honest sheriff type. And I also like that they didn't have her killing indiscriminately. She only does it when she has to. I mean, the rest of the time she just punches people or does MMA moves on them. And I presume that this is a setup for like one of the many, many spin-off shows they've recently announced coming out over the next few years. But a lot of this is actually part of the problem with the show. Now, I mean, sure, it's a sci-fi and aliens show, but here's the thing. Ugly aliens are bad, cute aliens are good. I mean, right off the bat, that means if we see a bunch of ugly bad guys, then they're going to end up doing a nasty thing. Especially like, for example, here, like the beginning of this episode, oh look, ugly bad guys, and they're talking about eating a cute beastie. So they're bad, and it's okay when they die. Now, don't try and apply any logic to this, because, I mean, the fact that we've had, Baby Yoda eating literally the baby eggs that are the last in a line of a species because it was a funny joke. But it's more the fact that every week, like, Mandy will kill an ugly alien or 10, and we're supposed to cheer for it. And I mentioned it previously, but it becomes more and more egregious as the show goes on. I mean, the same thing with Stormtroopers. I mean, the Stormtrooper thing wouldn't be much of an issue, but as we see more and more every single week, everybody on the show just kills people left, right and centre without actually ever thinking about it. And while Stormtroopers have always been canon fodder bad guys in Star Wars, I mean, this week it was kind of bordering on the surreal. Like, we're almost at the levels of that bit in Rise of the Skywalker where the heroes run down a corridor shooting and they don't even seem to be looking. The bad guys look like they're throwing their heads in front of bullets to stop the wallpaper getting damaged. I mean, honestly, it's mental. And the trouble is, we're also in a post-Finn from, the Force Awakens era, so we know that stormtroopers are just people. In fact, most of them are child soldiers kidnapped from their families. And as well as that, we've had years of the TV shows saying that the clone troopers are actually people too, but it's only worried about when it's convenient because we'd have to have the good guys shooting at something. And yeah, sure, it also ties into the constant problem on the show where there's just absolutely zero threat level. I mean, there isn't. This is like something like Commando where Arnie can shoot a million bad guys and he never misses and nobody else manages to land a shot on him even though there are 100 guys firing at him at once. It just gets kind of tired. But, I mean, yeah, that was my big bugbear this week. But as a whole, this was a pretty decent episode. Now, I'll try and get the next episode out soon as I'm a wee bit behind, so until next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions. And a special thanks to everybody listening, and especially my patrons, and most especially to Michelle Forbes and Judith Coloma, my top tier patrons. Thank you everybody. Everybody stay safe. Cheerio.